What if the dream of being adored by millions turned into the nightmare of being laughed at by thousands? What if the flash of cameras that were meant to capture your triumph ended up freezing the very moment of your public humiliation? And what if the most electrifying man in Hollywood, a global superstar loved for his strength, humility, and charisma, turned that spotlight on you? Not with admiration, but with mockery. That's exactly what happened at the Venice Film Festival. Imagine the scene. The red carpet stretched out like a glowing river of velvet under the Italian night sky. The air was thick with perfume, anticipation, and the clamor of photographers shouting for attention. Stars glided across the carpet, each one fighting for the perfect angle, the headline-worthy shot. And then came Meghan Markle. Poised, polished, perfect, or so it seemed. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Her gown shimmered, custom-designed to catch every flicker of light. Her smile, practiced to appear natural, was flawless. Her husband, Prince Harry, stood beside her, playing the role of dutiful partner. For a fleeting moment, Meghan had it all: the cameras, the attention, the whispers of admiration. But just as quickly, that illusion cracked. Because that night, someone wasn't buying it. That night, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, one of the most respected, beloved, and influential figures in entertainment, was about to shatter the image Meghan tried so desperately to craft. And he did it with a single, brutal phrase. A phrase that would cut deeper than any headline, any meme, any snide comment in the tabloids. He called her the wannabe Diana. Now pause for a moment. Think about the weight of those words. Diana, the people's princess, the global icon whose compassion and vulnerability redefined what it meant to be royal. To be compared to Diana is one thing. But to be dismissed as nothing more than a wannabe? That isn't just an insult. That's a public execution of an image Meghan has spent years constructing. But before we unpack the full magnitude of that moment, let me ask you, why does this story matter? Why should you care about one star humiliating another on a red carpet halfway across the world? Because this isn't just about Meghan Markle. This isn't just about The Rock. This is about power, about authenticity versus performance, about the brutal truth that in Hollywood and in royalty, you can't fake legacy. You can't manufacture reverence. You can't buy love. And when you try, you risk humiliation on a scale that echoes around the globe. So let's rewind. Let's peel back the layers of this story, step by step, because the Venice Film Festival wasn't just a random night of glamour and gossip. No, it was the climax of years of tension, of Meghan trying to mold herself into a new Diana while the world, sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly, refused to let her. And here's the irony. Diana never tried to be Diana. She became who she was because of her raw humanity, her heartbreaks, her quiet strength in the face of relentless scrutiny. Meghan, on the other hand, has chased that shadow with rehearsed gestures, curated interviews, and a brand polished to perfection. But as we'll see, no amount of polish can survive a hammer blow. Still, before we reach the hammer, let's set the scene. Picture the canals of Venice on that night. Gondolas gliding under ancient bridges, tourists straining for a glimpse of celebrity magic. The festival itself is no ordinary premiere. It is the beating heart of global cinema, where legends are crowned and careers are defined. The Rock wasn't just another guest. He was one of the biggest stars of the night. Meghan and Harry, outsiders, trying to stake a claim in an industry that views them with suspicion. Already, there was tension. Already, the whispers had started. Why are they here? What film are they even attached to? Is this about movies or about relevance? And Meghan, ever the actress, played her role flawlessly. Hand in hand with Harry, she turned her arrival into a performance. Her smile, her wave, her subtle tilts of the head, all rehearsed, all calculated. But here's the problem. The audience wasn't buying tickets anymore. Because deep down, the public has a nose for authenticity. They can smell desperation like perfume gone sour. And as Meghan struck her poses on the carpet, there was a sense in the air, unspoken but undeniable. She was trying too hard. But still, she had the cameras. Still, she had the lights. Still, she had the illusion. For a moment. And then came The Rock. Now think about him. Dwayne Johnson isn't just a Hollywood star. He's bigger than that, literally and figuratively. He's built a reputation on being larger than life, but also real. He's approachable, authentic, the kind of celebrity who connects across generations. When he speaks, people listen. When he jokes, people laugh. When he criticizes, people pay attention. So when he opened his mouth that night, when he chose not to smile politely or brush off Meghan's carefully constructed aura, the moment hit like a thunderclap. Wannabe Diana. 2 words. Enough to echo across the red carpet. Enough to spark headlines before Meghan even left the venue. Enough to make her mask of confidence tremble, if only for a split second. But was it spontaneous? Was it a moment of unfiltered honesty from The Rock? Or was it something more calculated, a deliberate strike at someone he felt was overstepping, someone trying to hijack a legacy that wasn't hers to claim? That's the question we're going to explore. Because Meghan's story at the Venice Film Festival isn't just about humiliation. It's about collision. Between Hollywood and royalty, between authenticity and image, between power earned and power performed. And yet, what makes this story even more fascinating is how quickly it spiraled. Within hours, the internet was ablaze. Memes, headlines, tweets, some cheering The Rock for saying what everyone else was thinking, others condemning him for cruelty. And in the middle of it all, Meghan, once again, became the lightning rod. But let me ask you something. Why do we keep coming back to her? Why does Meghan Markle remain at the center of this endless storm, loved and hated in equal measure? Could it be that she embodies the very contradictions we're drawn to? Ambition versus vulnerability, performance versus authenticity, glamour versus insecurity? Think about it. If Meghan truly had no cultural pull, would this story even matter? If she weren't trying so hard to step into Diana's shadow, would The Rock's words sting so deeply? And here's where the irony bites hardest. Meghan craves to be Diana 2.0, the global figure of compassion, style, and influence. But Diana never craved it. She became it because the world saw in her something genuine. Meghan has tried to script that role, and audiences, whether in Buckingham Palace or Hollywood, reject scripts they didn't ask for. Still, here's the real kicker. Meghan had no idea what was coming that night. No idea that one of Hollywood's most powerful men was about to flip the script in front of the entire world. No idea that years of careful image building could be undone in seconds. As she smiled for the cameras, as Harry adjusted his cufflinks, as the flashes went off like fireworks, she thought she was winning. She wasn't. Because just a few steps away, The Rock was waiting. And when his moment came, when his words cut through the noise, the humiliation that followed wasn't just personal. It was historic. And that, my friends, was only the beginning. Because what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What's the difference between confidence and desperation? On the surface, sometimes nothing. The smile looks the same. The wave looks the same. The dazzling outfit looks the same. But underneath, that's where the truth hides. And on that glittering night in Venice, Meghan Markle's truth was about to slip out. No matter how carefully she thought she'd covered it up. Picture this. The air buzzing with energy. Paparazzi packed like sardines, shouting names, screaming, "Over here. Look this way." Flashbulbs popping like firecrackers. Each celebrity who stepped onto that carpet knew they had only seconds. Seconds to cement their moment in history, or seconds to fade into obscurity. The Venice Film Festival is not just a movie event. It's a battlefield of images. Reputations are made here. Careers are revived here. And for Meghan Markle, this wasn't just a premiere. It was her chance to rewrite her story. She wanted to walk that carpet not as a former actress who married a prince, not as the royal dropout who fled Buckingham Palace, not even as the Netflix dealmaker struggling to find her place in Hollywood. No, she wanted to walk it as something more, something Diana-like. A global icon, a figure who belonged in the upper stratosphere of fame. Her gown was chosen with surgical precision. Every fold, every shimmer was designed to scream elegance. The makeup, flawless but not overpowering, curated to look effortless, yet hours in the making. And the body language? Oh, she'd rehearsed that. A soft tilt of the head here, a gracious wave there. She radiated poise, or at least the illusion of it. But illusions are fragile. Have you ever noticed that the harder someone tries to appear natural, the less natural they seem? Meghan's smile didn't crack, but her eyes did. For the cameras, she was luminous. For the insiders watching from the sidelines, she was trying too hard. And in Hollywood, Trying too hard is the one sin you can never hide. Let's pause here, because I want to ask you something. Have you ever met someone who desperately wanted to be liked? You could feel it, couldn't you? It didn't matter how charming their words were, or how polished their appearance. Something in your gut told you it wasn't real. That's the energy Meghan carried with her on that carpet. And here's the contradiction. She thought she was dazzling. She thought she was winning. Yet the very effort to prove she belonged was the thing that betrayed her. Now contrast that with her husband, Prince Harry. Standing beside her, he looked awkward. Not unhappy, not angry, just misplaced. Like a man at a party he didn't want to attend, unsure of where to put his hands or how to hold his expression. If Meghan was putting on a performance, Harry was fumbling through his lines. The audience noticed. The whispers started. Some laughed quietly, others just shook their heads. Because while Meghan thought she was conjuring Diana's grace, the comparison in real time was painful. Diana never had to force it. She didn't rehearse authenticity. Meghan's every step, every gesture, screamed calculation. But here's the twist. For the cameras, it worked. At least for a while. The images were stunning. The photographers got their shots. Outlets rushed to push pictures online. To the casual viewer scrolling Instagram or flipping through a gossip site, Meghan looked radiant. She looked confident. She looked like she belonged. That's the mirage. Because the insiders, the ones who've walked 1,000 carpets, who've seen desperation cloaked in diamonds, they knew better. And standing only a few steps away was someone who wasn't fooled. Someone who knew exactly what he was seeing. The Rock. But before we get to him, let's linger on the psychology of this moment. Meghan had spent years telling the world she didn't want the spotlight, that she craved privacy. And yet here she was, in one of the most visible arenas on the planet, orchestrating every detail of her appearance. Is that irony? Hypocrisy? Or is it simply the hunger for validation, the kind of hunger that no amount of attention can satisfy? Ask yourself this. If Meghan truly wanted to step out of Diana's shadow, why choose a venue so loaded with symbolism, so public, so grand? Why step onto a stage where the ghosts of authenticity are lurking in every lens? Because Meghan believed she could control the narrative. She believed she could walk that carpet, smile that smile, wave that wave, and people would see her the way she wanted to be seen. But images aren't everything. Context is everything. And on that night, the context was brutal. Behind the glamour, Meghan was a woman fighting for relevance. Behind the curated perfection, there was insecurity. Behind the polished performance, there was the nagging truth. Diana never had to try. And that's why the comparison was so dangerous. Because once you invoke Diana, even indirectly, you invite scrutiny you cannot escape. Now, here's where the tension builds. As Meghan posed for the photographers, something unexpected happened. The cameras stopped clicking, just for a beat. A subtle shift in the energy rippled across the carpet. The kind of silence that isn't silence at all, it's anticipation. Everyone was waiting. Waiting for the next arrival. Waiting for the next flashpoint. Waiting for the star who would change the mood of the night. And then, from the corner of the carpet, a new figure stepped into view. A figure larger than life, commanding attention without even trying. His presence didn't need rehearsing. His charisma didn't need polishing. He didn't have to fake authenticity because authenticity was his brand. The Rock had arrived. And in that instant, the contrast couldn't have been sharper. Meghan, draped in calculated elegance, radiating forced poise. The Rock, towering, smiling, walking with ease, embodying the effortless power she craved. People turned. Photographers pivoted. Shouts filled the air, not for Meghan, not for Harry, but for him. Dwayne, over here. The Rock. The frenzy intensified, and for a moment, Meghan was no longer the center of the story. She hated that. You could see it in the flicker of her eyes, the stiffening of her shoulders. The red carpet, once her stage, was suddenly being pulled out from under her feet, and the man pulling it wasn't even trying. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room feeling like the star, only to realize that someone else, effortless, unbothered, stole the spotlight without lifting a finger? That's the humiliation Meghan was living in real time. But it was about to get worse. Because The Rock wasn't just there to pose for pictures. He wasn't just there to smile and wave. He had something to say. And when he said it, the illusion Meghan worked so hard to create would come crashing down in front of the entire world. But the first crack in that illusion wasn't his words. It was the shift in attention. The collective realization that Meghan wasn't the queen of the carpet after all. And as she clung to her poses, desperately trying to salvage her moment, the man who embodied everything she wanted, authenticity, power, admiration, was stepping closer, closer, and closer, until the mirage would break. But when it did, it wasn't just Meghan who would feel the sting. It was Harry. It was Hollywood. It was the myth she had spent years building. Because what came out of The Rock's mouth wasn't just commentary. It was judgment. And it landed harder than any headline ever could. And the world would never look at Meghan Markle the same way again. What makes someone larger than life? Is it fame? Is it wealth? Or is it the rare ability to command a room? Or in this case, an entire red carpet? Without even trying? Because when Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson stepped onto the scene at the Venice Film Festival, everything changed. The photographers who had been glued to Meghan Markle just seconds earlier spun on their heels. Flashes erupted like a thunderstorm. Shouts of "Dwayne, over here. Look this way," drowned out the noise of the crowd. And in that instant, Meghan's carefully staged spotlight dimmed to a faint glow. Here's the thing about The Rock. He doesn't need to prove himself. He doesn't need to rehearse charisma or choreograph authenticity. He's earned it. From wrestling arenas packed with tens of thousands to Hollywood blockbusters grossing billions, his journey has been one of grit, charm, and consistency. People love him because they trust him. Because what you see is what you get. Contrast that with Meghan. Every move she makes feels like it's been tested, weighed, and packaged for consumption. Every word, every gesture, every look seems like a performance. With The Rock, people feel connection. With Meghan, people feel calculation. And on that night in Venice, those two energies collided. The Rock didn't just walk the carpet. He owned it. Broad shoulders relaxed, smile wide, energy effortless. He wasn't trying to outshine anyone. He didn't have to. But the effect was the same. Meghan's illusion of dominance was shattered by his presence alone. Think about that for a second. Isn't it ironic that Meghan, who once played a supporting role on the TV show Suits, found herself back in a supporting role on a very different stage? And this time, the star wasn't fictional. He was real, larger, louder, more magnetic than anything she could fabricate. But the irony cut deeper still. Because The Rock, known for his charm and positivity, was about to break character. He was about to say something nobody expected, something that would shake the very foundation of Meghan's brand. But before we get to that moment, let's explore why his words carried such devastating weight. The Rock isn't just another Hollywood celebrity. He's one of the few global figures who transcends categories. Wrestler, actor, producer, business mogul, philanthropist. His reputation is rock solid, pun intended. And in an industry filled with scandals, betrayals, and hypocrisy, he stands out as authentic. People may disagree on their feelings about Meghan Markle. But when The Rock speaks, most people listen. So imagine being Meghan. Imagine standing there in your glittering gown, flashing your well-rehearsed smile, believing the cameras are devouring your every move, and then realizing, with painful clarity, that someone else has effortlessly stolen the scene. That someone else is everything you want to be, adored, respected, powerful. And he's about to call you out. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been caught pretending? Caught exaggerating? Caught trying to be something you're not? The shame that burns your face, the sinking pit in your stomach. You know the feeling. Now magnify it 1,000 times. Multiply it by millions of eyes watching around the world. That's what Meghan was about to face. Because as The Rock walked down that carpet, he wasn't just another star. He was the embodiment of authenticity colliding with artifice. And he knew it. There's a certain look The Rock has, half smile, half smirk, that tells you he's about to say something that matters. He doesn't blurt. He doesn't ramble. He times his words for maximum effect. And that night, with the world watching, he timed them perfectly. But before his words dropped, before his comments sliced through the glamour, Meghan tried to hold on. She leaned into Harry, tightening her grip on his hand. She repositioned herself so the cameras would angle back in her favor. She smiled brighter, posed harder, fought for relevance like a gambler doubling down on a losing bet. It didn't matter. The crowd's attention was gone. The photographer's lenses had shifted. The carpet had a new king. And Harry? He knew it. His jaw tightened, His smile grew stiff. His eyes darted toward the rock as though bracing for impact. Because he could feel it coming, the way animals sense an earthquake before it strikes. And then it came. The rock paused, just long enough for silence to hang in the air. Just long enough for every ear to tune in. Then he delivered it. Wannabe Diana. 2 words. Casual, almost playful in tone, but lethal in meaning. The effect was instant. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The photographers, hungry for drama, leaned forward, shutters firing like machine guns. Meghan's smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second, but enough for the cameras to capture it. Enough to betray the truth behind the mask. Now think about this. Why did those words sting so much? Why did they cut deeper than any tabloid headline or online insult? Because they came from someone who wasn't supposed to say them. The Rock isn't known for cruelty. He isn't known for cheap shots. He's known for charm, humor, authenticity. So when he said it, it didn't sound like gossip. It sounded like truth. And the truth hurts. Especially when it unmasks the very image you've built your career on. Here's where the contradiction becomes fascinating. Meghan wanted to be seen as Diana's heir in spirit. A woman wronged by the monarchy, adored by the people, a beacon of compassion. But in trying to script that image, she lost the authenticity that made Diana who she was. Diana never chased adoration, it followed her. Meghan, on the other hand, chased it relentlessly. And when The Rock called her out, he wasn't just mocking her. He was exposing her. Ask yourself this. How do you recover from being publicly labeled a fraud? Not by a tabloid, but by one of the most respected figures in entertainment? You don't. At least, not easily. But the humiliation didn't stop with Meghan's trembling smile. It spread. It touched Harry, whose face darkened as though the words were directed at him too. It touched the crowd, who whispered, laughed, exchanged knowing glances. And it touched Hollywood itself, which thrives on image but worships authenticity. Because if The Rock, the man whose approval everyone in Hollywood craves, was willing to call Meghan out, what did that say about her standing in the industry? It said the whispers weren't whispers anymore. They were shouts. Now here's the twist. The Rock didn't linger. He didn't gloat. He didn't even repeat himself. He dropped the line, let it hang, and moved on. As if the words were nothing. As if they didn't matter. But they did. Oh, they did. Because the cameras had captured it. The crowd had heard it. And by the time Meghan left that carpet, the phrase, wannabe Diana, was already spreading across the internet like wildfire. But was it spontaneous? Or was it calculated? Was The Rock simply speaking his mind? Or was this a deliberate strike against someone Hollywood had grown tired of? That's the mystery. And that mystery only deepened when Meghan tried to spin it. When she and her PR machine scrambled to control the narrative. When she leaned into victimhood yet again. But that's another chapter. For now, let's stay in that moment. The carpet. The glare of the cameras. The sting of humiliation hanging in the air like smoke. Meghan trying to hold her smile. Harry gripping her hand tighter. And The Rock, walking away with effortless ease, leaving behind the wreckage of an image shattered in 2 words. Because what came next wasn't just embarrassment. It was war. A war of perception. A war of narratives. A war Meghan thought she could win. But she was wrong. And soon, the battle would move far beyond the red carpet. Why do 2 words carry more power than an entire speech? Why can a single phrase undo years of carefully constructed image-making? Because words don't just describe. They expose. And when The Rock let those 2 words slip, wannabe Diana, he wasn't just throwing shade. He was tearing open a wound Meghan Markle has spent years trying to hide. Let's go back to that exact moment. The crowd buzzing, cameras flashing, Meghan standing there with Harry at her side. She believed she was in control. She believed she was presenting herself as untouchable. Then, like a thunderbolt, came the comment. Wannabe Diana. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't cruel. It was casual, almost offhand. But that made it worse. Because when something is delivered so effortlessly, it feels less like an insult and more like a fact. Have you ever heard someone dismiss you with a throwaway remark, and it stung more than if they'd yelled in your face? That's the power of understatement. And that's why Meghan's carefully rehearsed smile faltered in that split second, her mask slipping just enough for the cameras to catch it. Here's the thing. Meghan has lived in Diana's shadow ever since she entered the royal orbit. From the day she married Prince Harry, the media framed her as the next Diana, or as Diana's opposite. And Meghan leaned into it. The outfits, the interviews, the emotional narratives. She wanted the world to see her as Diana 2.0, misunderstood, hounded by the press, loved by the people. But Diana's legacy can't be copied. And the cruel irony is this: the more Meghan tried to emulate her, the more she exposed herself as an imitation. And The Rock, knowingly or not, summed that up in 2 words. Let's unpack why those words carried such devastating impact. First, Diana's image is sacred. She wasn't just a royal. She was a cultural phenomenon, a humanitarian, a woman whose death still feels raw decades later. To invoke Diana's name is to invoke emotion, nostalgia, reverence. And to suggest that someone is a wannabe Diana is to imply they're cheapening that legacy. It's not just an insult, it's sacrilege. Second, consider the source. This wasn't a tabloid hack. This wasn't an anonymous troll online. This was The Rock, a man whose reputation for authenticity and integrity made the words land with 10 times the force. If he says it, people believe it. Third, the timing. Meghan was at her most vulnerable. On the red carpet, trying to cement her image, desperately clinging to the spotlight. And in that fragile moment, the comment struck like lightning. But the impact didn't stop at Meghan. Harry felt it too. Because in dismissing Meghan as a wannabe Diana, the words also cast a shadow on him. They implied that he'd fallen for the imitation rather than honoring the original. That he'd allowed his mother's memory to be exploited. That had to cut deeper than anyone could see. Now here's where things get even more fascinating. The crowd reacted instantly. Gasps, laughter, murmurs. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others smirked, as if The Rock had said what everyone else was too polite to say out loud. The photographers went wild, their shutters capturing not just Meghan's falter but the reactions around her. And within minutes, those words were on social media. Clips of the moment spread like wildfire. Twitter hashtags, Instagram reels, TikTok parodies. Memes exploded across the internet. Wannabe Diana wasn't just a comment, it was a brand. And it was attached to Meghan whether she liked it or not. Let me ask you this. How do you fight a label once it sticks? Can you erase it? Can you spin it? Or does every attempt to deny it just make it more true? Because Meghan's PR team tried. Oh, they tried. Almost immediately, whispers began that the comment was taken out of context. That The Rock didn't mean it that way. That Meghan had laughed it off. But the damage was done. The clip was out there. The expressions were captured. And the internet doesn't care about context. It cares about spectacle. And the spectacle was humiliating. Now let's pull back for a moment. Why did this humiliation matter so much? Why didn't Meghan just brush it off as another celebrity jab? Because this wasn't just about her reputation in the tabloids. This was about her standing in Hollywood. Hollywood thrives on perception. If you're seen as authentic, you win. If you're seen as fake, you lose. And for years, Meghan has fought the perception of being calculated, performative, insincere. The Rock's words crystallized that perception into a single phrase. He didn't just call her fake. He called her the ultimate kind of fake, a counterfeit Diana. And here's the cruel twist. By reacting, even slightly, to the comment, Meghan proved it hit the mark. Her eyes faltered. Her smile stiffened. Her grip on Harry's hand tightened. Those tiny cracks in her mask told the world The Rock was right. But was this truly spontaneous? Or was it calculated on his part? That's the question. Because The Rock is not careless with words. He understands his influence. He knows the weight his voice carries. Was this an offhand remark? Or was it a deliberate decision to call her out? To say what Hollywood insiders had been whispering for years? If it was calculated, the implications are huge. It means Hollywood has had enough. It means Meghan's attempts to rebrand herself as royalty meets Hollywood have failed. It means the industry, through one of its biggest stars, has drawn a line. And if it was spontaneous? Well, that might be even worse. Because it means the perception of Meghan as a wannabe Diana is so obvious, so universal, that it slips out without thought. Either way, the effect was devastating. And it didn't end on the carpet. That comment followed Meghan into the venue, into the whispers at the after-party, into the headlines the next morning, and into the strategy sessions of her PR team scrambling to contain the fallout. Because once the world sees you as an imitation, it's almost impossible to prove you're original. But here's the cruelest irony. Diana never asked to be Diana. She never tried to be a symbol. She became one by being herself, by being vulnerable, flawed, and real. Meghan, in chasing that image, exposed herself as the opposite. And The Rock, with 2 words, pulled back the curtain. Now think about this. If Meghan's greatest weapon has always been her ability to control the narrative, through interviews, through documentaries, through calculated appearances, what happens when that control is shattered in a single public moment? It leaves her powerless, naked, exposed. And that's exactly what happened that night. But this humiliation wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because Meghan's team wasn't about to let the label "Wannabe Diana" stick without a fight. They launched into spin mode. They tried to reshape the story. They tried to weaponize sympathy. And in doing so, they made it worse. Because what came next wasn't just a PR battle. It was a collapse. And no one, not Meghan, not Harry, not even The Rock, could predict how far the fallout would spread. What happens when an image cracks? Do you let it shatter? Or do you rush to glue the pieces back together, hoping no one notices the fracture lines? For Meghan Markle, the answer was obvious. You fight. You spin. You deploy the machine. Because Meghan doesn't just have a publicist. She has a war room. A team dedicated to shaping perception, rewriting narratives, and flooding the media with stories that fit her version of reality. Some celebrities have PR reps. Meghan? She has an entire apparatus, polished from her days in Hollywood and sharpened during her time in the royal family. And when The Rock's 2 little words detonated across the internet, that apparatus went into overdrive. The playbook was simple: deny, distract, and reframe. Step 1. Denial. Within hours of the red carpet humiliation, whispers began to circulate that the comment was taken out of context. Anonymous sources close to Meghan fed quotes to friendly outlets, insisting she had laughed it off, that she found The Rock's comment playful, that the media was exaggerating. But denial only works when the evidence isn't on video. Unfortunately for Meghan, the clip was everywhere. Millions had seen it. Millions had dissected it frame by frame. They saw her smile falter, her eyes twitch, her hand clutch Harry's tighter. The internet is ruthless, and denial only made her look more dishonest. Step 2. Distraction. As soon as denial failed, Meghan's PR team tried to bury the story beneath a flood of new ones. Positive press releases about her charity work. Puff pieces about her stunning fashion choice at Venice. Carefully timed social media posts showcasing her happy family life. But distraction backfired. Why? Because every attempt to shift focus reminded people of what they were supposed to forget. And every glowing headline about Meghan's grace and elegance looked hollow when contrasted with the humiliation clip going viral. Step 3. Reframe. This was the most aggressive strategy. Instead of ignoring The Rock's comment, Meghan's team tried to flip it. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. Meghan was the victim of bullying. The Rock was punching down. Headlines began to appear in sympathetic outlets, painting Meghan as a strong woman unfairly attacked for daring to speak her truth. But here's the contradiction. Meghan has spent years positioning herself as empowered, fearless, in control. To suddenly pivot into victim mode looked weak. Worse, it looked manipulative. Audiences aren't blind to spin, they can smell it. And the more Meghan's team tried to reframe the humiliation as bullying, the more the public saw desperation. Let me ask you this. Have you ever watched someone try too hard to defend themselves, only to dig a deeper hole? That's exactly what was happening. Meghan's attempts to control the narrative became the narrative, and the phrase, "wannabe Diana," gained more traction with every failed PR tactic. But let's pause for a moment. Why was Meghan so desperate to fight back? Why not just brush it off and move on? Because she knows image is all she has left. Think about it. In the royal family, Meghan couldn't control the narrative. Every move she made was filtered through the palace machine. When she left, she believed she'd finally be free to shape her story. Netflix deals, Spotify podcasts, carefully curated interviews, each one designed to present her as Diana reborn, a woman misunderstood, persecuted, but destined for greatness. But the reality was harsher. The Spotify deal collapsed. The Netflix projects underperformed. The interviews were mocked for being self-indulgent. And Hollywood, an industry that worships authenticity, saw through the act. So when The Rock called her a wannabe Diana, he didn't just insult her. He destroyed the fragile foundation of her brand. And Meghan knew it. That's why the PR machine kicked into gear so aggressively. It wasn't about one comment. It was about survival. And yet, here's the twist. The harder Meghan pushed, the worse it got. Because PR spin only works when the audience still believes in the product. And after Venice, the audience didn't believe anymore. They saw the cracks. They saw the performance. They saw the desperation. And the comparisons to Diana? They became crueler. Commentators noted how Diana never needed a PR machine to make people love her. Diana didn't rehearse authenticity. It poured out of her naturally. Diana didn't need to call herself compassionate. She simply was. The very fact that Meghan was fighting so hard to control the narrative proved The Rock's point. She wasn't Diana. She was a wannabe. And Hollywood insiders were laughing. Behind closed doors, executives whispered about how the act is over. Publicists joked about how even The Rock sees through it. The label stuck, not because it was fair, but because it felt true. But here's the most devastating part. Meghan's team thought they were putting out fires. In reality, they were pouring gasoline. Every denial, every distraction, every reframe fueled the story. The internet thrives on contradiction, and Meghan was serving it on a silver platter. The memes grew sharper, the headlines harsher, the whispers louder. And Meghan? She grew angrier, more frantic, more determined to prove she was in control. But control is a slippery thing. The harder you grip it, the faster it slips away. Let me ask you again. Have you ever tried to fix something broken, only to make it worse? That's what Meghan's PR machine was doing. They weren't fixing her image, they were magnifying the cracks. And Harry? He was caught in the middle. His loyalty to Meghan clashed with the haunting memory of his mother. He wanted to defend his wife, but how could he when the world was mocking her for trying to imitate the very woman he revered most? His silence on the issue spoke volumes. And that silence left Meghan even more exposed. Because if even Harry wouldn't publicly defend her, what did that say? But here's where the story takes another turn. While Meghan's PR machine scrambled, Hollywood was watching. Quietly, silently, power players were taking note. And their judgment was even harsher than The Rock's. Because in Hollywood, the worst label you can carry isn't wannabe Diana. It's inauthentic. And Meghan was wearing that label like a neon sign. And as the days passed, as the headlines refused to die, one question lingered in the air. Could Meghan ever recover? Or was this the beginning of the end for her Hollywood dream? Because while Meghan was fighting a PR war, something far more dangerous was brewing behind the scenes. The whispers weren't whispers anymore. They were strategies. And Meghan was about to learn that in Hollywood, when the insiders turn against you, there's no PR machine in the world that can save you. Silence. That's the sound Meghan Markle feared most after Venice. Not the boos of a crowd, not the venom of a headline, but silence. Because in Hollywood, silence doesn't mean indifference. It means exile. After The Rock's wannabe Diana bombshell, Meghan's PR team fought desperately to spin the story. They denied, distracted, reframed. But while they were scrambling, Hollywood wasn't speaking. Studios, producers, agents, influencers, all quiet. And that silence was louder than any insult. Why? Because Hollywood is built on perception. People don't publicly attack unless they sense weakness. They don't openly endorse unless they're sure it'll benefit them. So when the industry chose silence, it wasn't neutrality. It was judgment. It was Hollywood saying, we're watching, and we don't buy it. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been at a party, told a story, and felt the room go cold? No laughter, no sympathy, just polite nods? That's what Meghan was experiencing. Except the party was an entire industry. Behind the scenes, whispers were spreading. Executives joked at lunches. Casting directors rolled their eyes in meetings. One producer reportedly quipped, "If she's Diana, then I'm Elvis." The Rock's comment had crystallized what Hollywood already suspected. Meghan wasn't authentic. And in an industry that thrives on authenticity, no matter how manufactured it might be, that was the kiss of death. Here's the contradiction that sealed her fate. Meghan left the royal family to escape control, to build her own narrative, to be free. But in doing so, she entered Hollywood, the most controlling, image-obsessed industry in the world. The palace may have stifled her, but at least it gave her a stage. Hollywood, it devours fakes alive. And Meghan, despite her training as an actress, wasn't playing the Hollywood game well. She wasn't charming the insiders. She wasn't building alliances. She wasn't offering value. Instead, she was demanding the spotlight, demanding respect, demanding to be treated as a star without doing the work to earn it. That's why The Rock's jab landed so brutally. Because it wasn't just about Diana. It was about Hollywood's perception that Meghan wanted the rewards of fame without the authenticity or humility required to sustain it. Let's get specific. After Venice, Meghan's team reached out to secure meetings with major studios. They pitched new projects. They tried to lock down cameos and collaborations. But the responses were tepid at best. We'll circle back. Let's revisit in 6 months. In Hollywood, that's code for no. Agents who once took her calls quickly grew distant. Producers who once entertained her pitches politely declined. Even the influencers who flocked to celebrity clout began keeping their distance. Meghan wasn't hot anymore. She was radioactive. And Hollywood doesn't touch radioactive. But why? Why did they turn so fast? Because Hollywood isn't loyal to individuals. It's loyal to the narrative. And the narrative after Venice was clear. Meghan wasn't an icon. She was a wannabe. And no one wants to bankroll a wannabe. Have you noticed how fast Hollywood drops people the moment they look weak? One misstep, one failed project, one viral humiliation, and suddenly, doors close. That's the brutal reality Meghan was facing. And here's the twist. The silence wasn't just professional. It was social. Invitations to elite parties, quietly lost in the mail. Calls from friends in the industry, unreturned. Suddenly, Meghan and Harry weren't at the center of Hollywood's social scene. They were on the margins. And in a city where status is currency, that's financial death. But let's not forget the irony here. Meghan had banked everything on Hollywood embracing her. She left the royals believing America would crown her instead. She thought producers would line up to work with her, that celebrities would rally to her side, that audiences would adore her. And for a moment, right after the Oprah interview, it looked like that might happen. But Hollywood doesn't fall for performances twice. And by Venice, the spell had broken. The Rock's comment was just the spark. The fuel was already there. Failed projects, declining interest, whispers of diva behavior. Hollywood had been waiting for an excuse to turn. The Rock gave it to them. And the most painful part? Meghan knew it. She could feel it. The silence wasn't abstract. It was visceral. The empty calendar. The cooling relationships. The shrinking spotlight. Now here's a question for you. What's worse, being hated or being ignored? For Meghan, the answer was obvious. Hatred she could spin into victimhood. Hatred she could weaponize. But silence. Silence is unspinnable. Silence is final. And so, she tried harder. She doubled down on public appearances. She pushed harder on charity events. She released polished photo ops. But it was like shouting into the void. The world wasn't listening anymore. And Harry? He felt it too. Because while Meghan's Hollywood dream was collapsing, so was his. Remember, Harry had banked his post-royal identity on being Meghan's partner in their new empire. Without her Hollywood shine, what was left? A prince without a kingdom. The cracks between them began to widen. Meghan pushed the PR machine harder. Harry grew more withdrawn. Insiders whispered that he looked tired, disillusioned, lost. And Hollywood noticed. Because in this town, perception of your marriage matters almost as much as your career. Power couples win attention. Fractured couples lose it. And Meghan and Harry, once presented as the ultimate love story, now looked like a team cracking under pressure. But here's where the story deepens. Meghan's humiliation wasn't just about one red carpet. It wasn't just about The Rock's comment. It was about Hollywood finally making its judgment. And that judgment was brutal. Meghan wasn't Diana. She wasn't Hollywood royalty. She wasn't even a reliable star. She was a wannabe. And in Hollywood, wannabes don't last. Yet the story doesn't end there. Because when Hollywood turns its back, you have two choices. Fade quietly into obscurity or fight back with something explosive. And Meghan? She chose to fight. But the way she chose to fight next would shock even her closest allies. Because her next move wasn't about image. It wasn't about Hollywood. It was about Harry. What does silence sound like when it comes from the person you love most? For Meghan Markle, the humiliation at Venice was public, loud, and impossible to ignore. But for Prince Harry, the humiliation was quieter, deeper, and far more personal. Because while Meghan faced The Rock's words, Harry was forced to confront the one ghost he could never outrun, his mother, Diana. Think about it. For years, Harry has told the world how Diana's death scarred him, how the paparazzi hounded her, how the royal family failed her. Diana wasn't just his mother. She was his cause, his shield, his reason for leaving the royal family. And then, in front of cameras, in front of the industry that was supposed to embrace them, Meghan was branded a wannabe Diana. That wasn't just an insult to her. It was a dagger aimed straight at him. How could he defend Meghan without undermining Diana? How could he claim Meghan was being unfairly compared when Meghan herself had leaned so hard into the Diana parallels? The truth was brutal. Meghan's entire image rested on evoking Diana, yet the moment someone said it out loud, it turned into mockery. And Harry had no words. This is where the silence began. On the red carpet, when Meghan's smile faltered, Harry squeezed her hand tighter. Not to comfort, but to steady himself. He didn't flinch. He didn't lash out. He didn't say a word. Cameras caught it. His jaw clenched, his eyes darting away. For a man who had always been quick to defend Meghan against critics, his silence was deafening. Why? Because Harry was conflicted. Defending Meghan meant doubling down on a comparison he hated. But staying silent meant leaving her exposed. So he chose the only option left, retreat. And that retreat grew. In the days after Venice, Meghan's PR team worked overtime, pushing victimhood, spinning narratives. But Harry stayed quiet. No statements. No fiery defenses. No Instagram videos. No speeches. He let Meghan take the hits alone. For a woman who built her brand on Harry and Meghan as an inseparable unit, his absence was glaring. Let me ask you this. Have you ever seen a couple where one partner is fighting loudly while the other pulls away quietly? You can feel the imbalance. The tension. That's exactly what insiders noticed after Venice. Friends close to the couple whispered that Harry looked defeated. One source claimed he spent more time in private, avoiding strategy sessions. Another said he seemed tired of being the attack dog. For years, he'd fought Meghan's battles, against the palace, against the press, against his own family. But now, faced with Hollywood's silent judgment, he didn't have the strength. And here's the irony. Harry had always been the outsider in the royal family, the rebellious one, the man willing to walk away from tradition. But in Hollywood, he wasn't the rebel. He was the accessory, Meghan's plus one. The prince turned prop. And Venice proved it. The story wasn't about him. It was about her. His voice didn't matter. His presence didn't matter. He was background. How long can a man tolerate being background in his own life? This is where Harry's silent struggle deepened. Because it wasn't just about Meghan. It was about identity. In the UK, he had been Prince Harry, son of Diana, brother of the future king. In America, he thought he'd be free, an equal partner in a new empire. But by Venice, it was clear. He was Meghan's husband, nothing more. And the cruel twist? Even that role was starting to crack. Because if Meghan's image was collapsing, what did that make him? Here's where the emotion cuts deep. Imagine being Harry. Imagine watching your wife, the woman you left your family for, being mocked as a wannabe Diana. Imagine knowing that deep down, the criticism had some truth. Imagine realizing that in trying to honor your mother's memory, you tied yourself to someone who was being accused of imitating her. The guilt must have been unbearable. And yet, Harry said nothing. But silence speaks. And Hollywood noticed. Journalists noted the absence of a defense. Commentators speculated about cracks in the marriage. Was Harry losing faith? Was he quietly pulling back? Was he regretting the choices that had led him here? That's the thing about silence. It invites interpretation. And every interpretation hurt Meghan more. But Harry's silence wasn't just passive. It was strategic. Insiders whispered that he wanted to distance himself from the wannabe Diana label. That he refused to engage because he knew it would only make things worse. That he was beginning to see the dangers of tying himself too closely to Meghan's Hollywood battles. And yet, he couldn't walk away. Not completely. He was trapped. Bound by love, by loyalty, by shared exile. But inside, he was unraveling. The signs were everywhere. Paparazzi shots of him looking withdrawn. Friends describing him as checked out. Analysts pointing out how Meghan spoke for both of them more often, while Harry stared blankly beside her. And behind closed doors, the tension grew. Meghan, furious at the humiliation, wanted him to fight. She wanted him to defend her as passionately as he once defended Diana's memory. But Harry hesitated. Because this time, the battle wasn't against the monarchy. It wasn't against the tabloids. It was against Hollywood itself. And Hollywood doesn't lose. This is the silent struggle Harry faced. Fight and look foolish, or stay silent and look weak. Either way, he lost. And that loss began to change him. Remember, Harry had built his entire post-royal identity around purpose, mental health advocacy, environmental causes, veterans issues. But after Venice, those causes felt overshadowed. Every headline, every social media post, every conversation was about Meghan's humiliation. Harry's work was sidelined. His voice drowned out. His purpose eroded. He was no longer Prince Harry, advocate. He was Prince Harry, husband of the wannabe Diana. And that realization cut him deeper than any insult. But here's the most dangerous part. When a man feels stripped of identity, when he feels powerless, when he feels silenced in his own life, resentment grows. Quietly, slowly, inevitably. And resentment, once it takes root, can destroy everything. So the question is this: would Harry's silence remain silence? Or would it eventually erupt into something far louder, far more devastating? Because the struggle inside him was reaching a breaking point. And what happened next would test not just his loyalty to Meghan, but his loyalty to himself. How fast can a reputation crumble? In the digital age, the answer is simple: seconds. Because when The Rock's words, "wannabe Diana," hit the internet, they didn't just spark whispers. They ignited an inferno. The clip of Meghan's faltering smile was uploaded within minutes. Camera angles from every outlet surfaced. A 6-second TikTok loop of the comment racked up millions of views overnight. Memes flooded Twitter. Instagram posts captioned with "wannabe Diana" spread like wildfire. And the backlash wasn't just harsh, it was merciless. This is the cruelty of the internet. It doesn't just replay humiliation. It amplifies it. It twists it into jokes, hashtags, GIFs. And the more Meghan tried to move past it, the more the internet dragged her back in. Let's start with the memes. Some compared her Venice look to Diana's iconic outfits. But side by side, Meghan came off as an imitator. Others edited The Rock into images of Diana, holding a crown just out of Meghan's reach. One viral tweet read, "Diana walked so Meghan could trip." Harsh, brutal, but irresistible to a digital audience hungry for irony. Then came the hashtags. Hashtag "wannabe Diana" trended globally. Hashtag "not our princess" went viral in the UK. Even hashtag Team Rock began trending, with fans praising him for saying what we've all been thinking. And the irony? The more Meghan's PR team tried to bury these hashtags, the more they grew. That's the internet's golden rule. What you resist, persists. But the backlash wasn't just jokes. It was anger. Ordinary people, once sympathetic to Meghan's struggles with the royal family, began voicing frustration. "I supported her when she left the royals, but this Diana cosplay is too much. She's exploiting Diana's memory," and The Rock finally called it out. These weren't trolls. These were once allies, now disillusioned. And then came the influencers. Big-name YouTubers, TikTok commentators, and gossip podcasters pounced on the story. Entire episodes were dedicated to dissecting the Venice humiliation. Some were gleeful, others sympathetic, but the net result was the same. Meghan's humiliation was now content. She wasn't just a person, she was a punchline. Let me ask you, have you ever been mocked online? Even by a handful of people? It stings. It keeps you awake at night. Now magnify that by millions. By headlines. By international memes. That's what Meghan was living through. And here's the contradiction. Meghan had always used the internet to her advantage. Instagram posts to cultivate a fan base. Carefully timed interviews to shape her narrative. Netflix specials streamed to millions. But the same machine that once boosted her was now turning against her. The internet doesn't love forever. It loves novelty. And now, Meghan's humiliation was the novelty. But the backlash went deeper. Because it wasn't just Meghan being mocked. It was her entire relationship with Harry. Couples memes exploded. The Rock is more protective of Diana's legacy than Harry is. Harry traded the real Diana for a wannabe. These were daggers. And Harry's silence only made the mockery worse. Meanwhile, The Rock's fanbase celebrated. They flooded his comment sections with praise. "Legend, you told the truth. The people's champ strikes again." The more Meghan sank, the more his star rose. He didn't have to say another word. The internet did the work for him. And Meghan? She tried to fight back. Her team pushed out glossy photos, smiling family portraits, carefully staged charity visits. But in the comments section, the same phrase repeated again and again, "Wannabe Diana." She couldn't escape it. It became the lens through which everything she did was judged. Here's the emotional twist. Diana herself had once been hounded by the media, mocked, ridiculed, scrutinized. But Diana earned sympathy because her suffering felt genuine. Meghan, facing the same storm, couldn't evoke sympathy because the public saw her as performing victimhood, not living it. And that's the tragedy. In trying to embody Diana, Meghan set herself up for the same scrutiny, but without the shield of authenticity that had protected Diana. The backlash grew darker still. Old interviews were dug up. Clips of Meghan speaking about Diana were reshared, now framed as evidence of obsession. Tabloids published side-by-side spreads of Diana and Meghan, branding one as the original and the other as the copy. Even comedians got in on it. Late-night monologues cracked jokes at her expense. Audiences laughed. And laughter is the cruelest backlash of all, because it turns pain into entertainment. So here's the question. How do you survive when your humiliation becomes global sport? Meghan's instinct was to control the narrative. But online, control is an illusion. The internet decides what sticks, not PR teams. And wannabe Diana stuck harder than anything she'd faced before. Harry, meanwhile, watched the storm in silence. He saw the memes, the headlines, the jokes. He saw his mother's name dragged back into the spotlight, twisted into humiliation. And his silence became part of the story. Was he ashamed? Was he complicit? Was he trapped? The internet speculated endlessly, each theory cutting deeper into the couple's image. And Hollywood? Hollywood was watching too. Studios, producers, executives, all reading the headlines, all checking the hashtags, all calculating the risk. And the risk was obvious. Working with Meghan meant inviting mockery. And in Hollywood, perception is everything. That's why the backlash wasn't just an internet storm. It was a career earthquake. Because once the internet brands you, Hollywood follows. And Meghan was now branded, in neon letters, as the wannabe Diana. But here's the most dangerous part. Backlash doesn't stay contained. It spreads. It mutates. It infects everything around it. And soon, the humiliation wouldn't just be online. It would bleed into Hollywood boardrooms, into contracts, into alliances. Because what happened after the memes was far more devastating than any viral joke. Hollywood insiders began to turn. How long does it take for one red carpet moment to ripple through the boardrooms of Hollywood? Not long at all. In fact, it's almost instant. Because while the internet mocked Meghan Markle with memes and hashtags, Hollywood insiders weren't laughing. They were calculating. And those calculations spelled disaster for her future. Let's break this down. In Hollywood, perception is currency. A star's image determines not only their fan base, but also their bankability. If you're seen as authentic, you draw audiences. If you're seen as fake, you repel them. Executives don't gamble on liabilities. They gamble on sure things. And after Venice, Meghan looked like the riskiest gamble in town. Behind the scenes, meetings started to shift. Projects in development with Meghan attached, suddenly on hold. Pitch meetings her team had been chasing, quietly canceled. Agents who once bragged about representing her, now avoiding her calls. This wasn't paranoia, it was standard industry protocol. Hollywood smells weakness, and when it does, it moves fast. Here's the irony. Meghan had once been courted as a symbol of Hollywood's global reach, a Duchess-turned-producer, a woman straddling two worlds. For a brief moment, she had power. Netflix gave her a deal. Spotify signed her. Publishers lined up for memoirs and cookbooks. She was supposed to be Hollywood's royal connection. But Venice flipped the script. Instead of being a bridge between royalty and Hollywood, she became a punchline. And the fallout was brutal. Consider Netflix. They invested heavily in Meghan and Harry's brand. But the content didn't deliver. Viewership declined. Critics scoffed. Executives whispered that the couple's value wasn't worth the cost. And now, with Meghan branded a wannabe Diana, her credibility as a storyteller of authenticity was gone. How do you sell documentaries about compassion and resilience when the public sees you as fake? Spotify was worse. Their $20 million deal collapsed with executives calling Meghan and Harry grifters behind closed doors. That word, grifters, echoed in industry conversations after Venice. Because that's how Hollywood now saw her. Not as a creator, not as a visionary, but as someone trying to cash in without delivering substance. In publishing, her next big project was supposed to be a memoir. But after Venice, whispers spread. Would readers even care? Would the book be mocked as another performance, another attempt to mimic Diana's vulnerability? Publishers began hesitating. Because in publishing, timing is everything, and Meghan's timing was now poisoned. Let me ask you this. Have you ever seen someone at work lose credibility? One mistake, one misstep, and suddenly no one trusts their judgment. That's what was happening to Meghan, except on a global stage. But the fallout wasn't limited to projects. It was personal. Invitations dried up. Exclusive dinners, charity galas, award shows, spaces where power is traded as much as champagne, suddenly forgot to include Meghan and Harry. Their seats at the table weren't just empty. They were gone. Because Hollywood doesn't like risk. And Meghan had become the embodiment of it. Here's where the contradictions cut deepest. Meghan had fled the royals because she claimed the monarchy was toxic, controlling, stifling. She came to Hollywood for freedom. But now, Hollywood was closing in tighter than the palace ever did. In the palace, she was criticized but still had status. In Hollywood, she was criticized and stripped of power. And yet, the cruelest part of the fallout wasn't the silence. It was the laughter. Industry insiders joked about her behind closed doors. Late-night writers pitched Meghan jokes as easily as celebrity scandals. Producers laughed about wannabe Diana in private meetings. She wasn't just irrelevant. She was entertainment. And Harry? He was collateral damage. Because in Hollywood, you're only as strong as your partner. And if Meghan looked weak, so did he. Industry leaders who once entertained Harry's projects quietly stepped back. No Meghan, no Harry, one executive reportedly said. Their brand was tied together, and now, both were sinking. This is where the fallout deepened. Because Meghan wasn't just losing projects, she was losing allies. Celebrities who once supported her cause kept their distance. Public figures who once posted selfies with her now stayed quiet. The same Hollywood that embraced her when she was shiny and new was now abandoning her in silence. That's Hollywood's unspoken rule. You're loved until you're not. Let me pause here and ask you. What's worse, being hated or being irrelevant? For Meghan, the answer was becoming clear. The backlash online was humiliating. But the industry fallout? That was existential. Without projects, without allies, without credibility, what was left? And Meghan knew it. That's why she pushed harder. That's why her PR team worked overtime to spin news stories, to paint her as a survivor, to keep her name in circulation. But the more they pushed, the more Hollywood recoiled. Nobody wants to be manipulated. Nobody wants to be dragged into someone else's scandal. And here's the cruel twist. While Meghan's stock plummeted, The Rock's soared. His reputation for authenticity grew stronger. His brand expanded. He became not just untouchable, but bulletproof. The industry loved him even more for speaking the unspoken. And that contrast, The Rock's rise, Meghan's fall, only made her look weaker. But the fallout didn't stop with Meghan and Harry. It spread. Because when one power couple collapses, others take note. Meghan's fall became a cautionary tale. Don't overplay your hand. Don't chase authenticity you don't own. Don't try to be Diana. And the whispers in Hollywood grew into strategy. Behind closed doors, executives didn't just laugh. They plotted. They discussed how to distance themselves, how to quietly cut ties without making headlines, how to let Meghan fade away without the drama of a public break. And that's the scariest part. The fallout wasn't explosive, it was silent. No public cancellations. No loud statements. Just doors closing, one after another, until Meghan was left in the cold. But here's where the story sharpens. Meghan wasn't ready to accept exile. She wasn't ready to fade. She was ready to fight back. And her fight wouldn't be quiet. It would be loud, messy, risky. Because Meghan knew one thing. If Hollywood was closing its doors, she had to find another way in. But the path she chose next would only dig the hole deeper. Because the fight wasn't just against Hollywood. It was against Diana's ghost.